A lot of criticism on the front pages this morning as well for the Crown Prosecution Service, who had decided to proceed with the case against Caroline Flack. It's been reported as well that apparently it was body cam footage from the police officers themselves that she was most worried about getting into the public domain as a result of this altercation that she'd had with her partner that had resulted in these charges. Her partner had decided not to proceed with the charges. Lewis Burton, he decided that he didn't actually want to proceed with any charges against her, but the Crown Prosecution Service decided it wanted to proceed anyway. Nick Freeman is a criminal defence lawyer. You'll know him. He's an author and commentator as well, also known as Mr. Loophole. Joins me live on the line. Morning to you, Nick.
Morning, Chris.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to us this morning here on Talk Radio. Before we hear your personal opinion on whether it was right or wrong, would you mind just explaining to us the legality of and the process in which the CPS might come to a decision, especially in a case of domestic violence, where they will choose to prosecute an alleged perpetrator even when the alleged victim decides that they don't want the case to proceed?
Yeah. In every case, whether it be domestic violence or any other offence or allegation, the Crown have to ask themselves two questions. First of all, is there at least a 50% chance of conviction? So that's based on the evidence. When they've investigated it, is there at least a 57% chance of conviction? And if they decide, yes, there is, they then go on and ask themselves this question: is it in the public interest to proceed with this prosecution? And that, of course, doesn't mean, is this something that the public will be interested in, but actually, is it in the public interest, which involves balancing all sorts of different criteria. But basically, it comes down to, is it proportionate? In this particular case, bearing in mind all the relevant matters for us to proceed with this prosecution, is that a proportionate response to the allegation and particularly what's relevant in this case are the mental health issues of Caroline. That, in my view, is one of the most important considerations, which we can talk about in a few moments. And if they decide that they tick both those questions, yes, it's in the public interest, and yes, we've got at least a 50% chance of conviction, then they proceed with the prosecution, and that's clearly what they concluded here.
Now, the CPS, as you alluded to, as I have too, have come in for a lot of criticism as a result of that decision. With what you've seen about this story, and obviously I'm sure there's stuff that you and I both don't know, so that hasn't come out yet, but from what you've seen in the reports about this story, where do you stand on whether that was the right decision?
Well, I think it was the wrong decision. The first issue, as you rightly said, we don't know exactly what the evidence is, but what we do know, so in relation to the first part of the test, did they have at least a 50% chance of conviction? I don't think there were any independent witnesses. When the police arrived, they were both covered in blood, and what we do have is Mr. Burton indicating to the CPS, and this is well documented, that he did not accept the Crown account. So if the Crown can't present a case that they can be sure beyond reasonable doubt is going to get home, in my view, there are evidential problems there. That's quite aside from the fact that he didn't wish to proceed. What he was saying was, actually, what you're saying is wrong. So in my view, it doesn't actually get beyond the first hurdle, is there at least a 50% chance of conviction? But let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that there was, and we proceed to the next part. When the police arrived on the 12th of December, Caroline, when she was arrested, said that she was going to kill herself. Both her wrists were slit. She has well-documented mental health issues. She suffers from severe depression. She suffers from panic attacks. And she is in a very fragile emotional state. And I also think it's relevant that there have been 2 previous suicides on Love Island. So this is there is an atmosphere and aura about the programme which has very tragically led to the suicide of 3 young people now. When she appeared in court, I'm not sure whether it was the court or the police who imposed conditions of non-association. So the allegation occurred on the 12th of December. She's then placed on bail, and there were conditions of non-association, which means that neither her and her boyfriend could contact each other, despite the fact that both of them wanted to, and despite the fact, of course, that it was Christmas. And when you're dealing with somebody who is in an emotional, fragile state, to keep them apart from their loved one over Christmas is pretty cruel when both of them actually want to be together. That's what they both wanted. And then we have further representations made by the defence, and I don't know whether those consisted of a psychiatric report. I certainly would have obtained a psychiatric report and presented it to the Crown Prosecution Service, pointing out to them quite unequivocally that if you proceed with this case, this is a possible or probable outcome. So they would have it there in front of them. And it may be that the defence lawyers did that. I just don't know. But
it may be as well, sorry to interrupt, but it may be as well that there would have been a worry from Caroline Flack that if they had done that and it had been a matter of public record, would that have jeopardised any work that she would have got in the future if she'd had to have admitted?
No. Well,
is that the case or not, do you think?
Christo, not at all, because first of all, many celebrities suffer from mental health issues, many members of the public. It's something that plagues our life, possibly in part because of social media, trolling. We've had a trial by media here, haven't we? We can go into all that, but it's we're trying to concentrate just on the legal aspect and her mental state. And you know what we know is the representations made very recently, and despite those representations, the CPS decided, clearly wrongly, that they were going to go ahead with it. Obviously, they didn't know that she was going to do this; otherwise, they would not have proceeded. But in my view, the risk was very strong. She threatened it. She'd slit her wrists in the past. It was well documented, the fragile state of her mental health, her mental state, and it was too much for her to bear. And the support wasn't there. And what's critical is that the CPS have power and a duty, a legal duty, right the way through until that jury or judge delivers a verdict to review the evidence. And they were in receipt of evidence which suggested that it was dangerous for this case to proceed because of her mental health issues. And notwithstanding that, they did proceed, they decided to proceed, and it was well within their power to say, actually, we think there is a grave risk to health, and therefore it would not be in the public interest to proceed, and we are going to discontinue the proceedings.
But then how does an organisation like the CPS get the balance right, though? Because presumably the decisions that they make to perhaps proceed with these sorts of cases when the alleged victim says, I don't agree with the evidence, as you pointed out, and that I don't agree with the version of events, I don't want to be on board with a prosecution, presumably the intentions of the CPS are... The CPS have the best intentions on behalf of the alleged victim, because by them pursuing it, they're trying to stop a situation where alleged victims will perhaps want to, which does happen, as I'm sure you've experienced in. Sometimes alleged victims actually end up wanting to protect the alleged perpetrator, and if the CPS don't pursue the prosecution, you could find a situation where a perpetrator gets off.
Yep, that's absolutely right, and that's why every case has to be looked at on its own merits. This case unusually involves alleged violence by a woman against a man, and the CPS obviously have to very carefully weigh up each case and decide, is the complainant, is Mr. Burton being put under pressure to withdraw? Why does he want to withdraw? Is he in danger? Is there a likelihood of this occurring again? She was a lady of previous good character. And he said, I don't want to proceed, I want to be with her, and furthermore, what you're saying is wrong. So that there are some very strong arguments for saying that this matter should not have proceeded. That's quite apart from the mental health issues. So that they have to look at it on the evidence that they have. But they were aware from what Mr. Burton said, your evidence is wrong. This is not what happened. We will never now know what happened. It's irrelevant. That's not really what we're concentrating on. But for the complainant, the witnesses, she's a lady of good character, and of course she's presumed to be innocent. So right the way through, she's presumed to be innocent. And what it means is when she's of good character, it means she's less likely to commit the offence and more likely to tell the truth. So this would have been a particularly hard case to get home. But what she's endured is, unfortunately, trial by media and trial by trolling. Which she has been able to cope with. Whether or not Parliament introduces legislation to stop that, I don't know. It clearly should do, because many people can't cope. And, I think you've alluded to media have played a part, and lots of people have deleted articles and comments about this particular lady when it's been vilified.
Nick, just before I let you go, and I really appreciate the time you've taken to discuss this with us, I just want to read you a tweet from someone. Raymond has sent a tweet into the programme saying, what signal to male victims of domestic violence would be sent if the CPS did not prosecute violent females? And I think that there would perhaps be a fear from people, and that tweet demonstrates it, that if you're going to present someone who is perhaps not stable or has psychological problems, that could be an easy way of getting out of a prosecution. So what do you respond to that text that says that it would perhaps give a detrimental message to victims if the CPS chose not to pursue?
Well, we need to be quite clear. Domestic violence is an abhorrent crime, and the CPS play a very crucial role in stamping it out and proceeding in prosecutions. They are professionals, and they must look at every case on its merits. And while I understand what Raymond said, we have to look at this particular case. And without repeating myself, I've already said quite clearly what Mr. Burton said, her mental health, and what all those things militate against saying, actually, we're going to put the brakes on this in this case. That's not giving the green light in every other case and saying, actually, we're going to pull the plug because a woman's attacked a male and there's a vague suggestion of mental health. You look at it very carefully, very thoroughly, and make the right decision. And there's no question here, the wrong decision was made tragically.
Nick Freeman, the lawyer, criminal defence lawyer, I should say, author and commentator, also known as Mr. Loophole. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us this morning here